The first time you hear about it, it probably is not from a dashboard or a security alert. It is in a meeting where a marketing lead casually mentions our churn model, or a finance manager talks about the bot that drafts our forecasts. A few questions later, it becomes clear that these are not initiatives on your official artificial intelligence (AI) roadmap. They are small projects built in notebooks, vendor dashboards, and improvised pipelines that never went near a formal review. This narration is drawn from the Wednesday headline feature in Bare Metal Cyber magazine, developed by Bare Metal Cyber, and it is about what you do once you realize that these models in the corners are not the exception, they are the default.
Over the next few years, shadow AI will say less about how disciplined you are and more about how your operating model actually works. When central platforms move slowly, governance feels opaque, and pressure to show AI wins ramps up, smart people do what they have always done. They solve the problem in front of them with whatever tools they can reach. The result is a spectrum that runs from harmless prototypes in sandboxes to models quietly nudging credit decisions or incident response. Treating all of that as a single policy violation almost guarantees that people stop telling you the truth. Leaders need a more granular view of where shadow AI lives, why it emerges, how its risks cluster, and which efforts should be shut down versus shepherded into the light.
This is not really a story about catching offenders. It is a story about recognizing that unmanaged machine learning, ML, and generative AI experiments are already woven into daily work, and deciding whether you will be surprised by them or deliberately shape them. As we walk through the terrain, the aim is to give you a stance you can explain to your own executives. Not, we eliminated shadow AI, but we know where it is, which of it we tolerate, and how we turn the best of it into an advantage. If you only look for shadow AI in official AI platforms, you will miss most of it. Much of the real action happens in ordinary tools stretched just far enough to count as models. A marketing analyst keeps a Python notebook on a shared drive that pulls exports from your customer relationship management (CRM) system and fits a simple churn classifier. A finance team spins up a temporary cloud workspace on someone's personal credit card and runs a forecasting model there once a week. An operations engineer wires a generative assistant into ticket data and asks it to draft remediation steps and customer updates. None of these efforts look big enough to be capital projects, but all of them are models built in the corners of your business. Shadow AI also hides inside vendor dashboards and pilot features that feel like simple configuration. A customer support platform quietly rolls out an AI reply assist capability that uses your historical tickets to tune its behavior, and a product manager toddles it on for a handful of agents. A sales enablement tool offers AI deal scoring based on vague industry data, and the field team begins to rely on its rankings to prioritize calls. From a governance perspective, these are models making decisions with your data, yet they often appear as a checkbox in an admin panel, not as a formal implementation. If your inventory only includes things the central AI team built, these features never exist on paper. Then there is the low-code and spreadsheet layer, where automation quietly slides into modeling. A planner creates a macro that calls an external application programming interface, API, promising AI-driven optimization. A business unit experiments with a low-code platform that offers predictive routing or anomaly detection as drag-and-drop components. To the people using them, these look like just another formula or flow. To you, they are systems learning from your data and influencing decisions without explicit accountable sponsorship. Leaders who want an honest picture have to widen their lens. Shadow AI is not just rogue models in custom stacks. It is any place where learning systems shape outcomes outside of formal ownership. Most of this does not start with someone trying to break rules. It starts with someone trying to do their job in an environment where the official paths feel too slow, too opaque,
or too misaligned with what the frontline needs. A marketing team is told to show AI impact this quarter, but the central data group is booked until the end of the year. A risk leader approves budget for an AI initiative, yet the intake process feels like a compliance audit instead of a partnership. In that gap, a product manager or analyst makes a very human judgment. A small model in a notebook or a vendor's built-in AI feature is the only realistic way to move. They do not experience themselves as going rogue. They experience themselves as getting work done.
Incentives amplify this behavior. Vendors promise that you can turn on AI in a platform with a few clicks, and executives talk about staying competitive in AI more loudly than they talk about guardrails, ownership, or how much risk they are comfortable with in exchange for speed. Business unit leaders hear the first part and respond rationally. If the scoreboard is demonstrate AI wins, then every shortcut that appears safe enough becomes attractive. When security and governance show up late with a simple no, they are not just correcting a technical issue, they are cutting across weeks of effort and political capital. That is how you breed secrecy. Underneath all of this is a trust problem between central functions and the rest of the organization. If teams believe that raising their hand early will lead to delay, scrutiny, and loss of control, they will not raise their hand. If they believe that bringing in half-baked ideas will earn them a collaborative design conversation and a path to yes, they will surface work much sooner. That dynamic is not an accident. It is a reflection of how you have funded, prioritized, and governed new technology in the past. Shadow AI is less a symptom of individual recklessness and more a mirror held up to your operating model.
When leaders first confront shadow AI, the instinct is often to ban it outright. Everything unsanctioned gets labeled as the same vague danger. We do not know what this model is doing. That reaction is understandable, but it is not very helpful. The reality is that shadow AI spans very different risk types and severities, and treating them as one amorphous blob makes good decision-making almost impossible. A small prototype using synthetic or de-identified data is not in the same league as a model that quietly influences loan approvals or production changes. A vendor feature using narrow metadata does not pose the same risk as a custom generative model pointed at sensitive logs and contracts. A more useful approach starts by segmenting risk into clear buckets. There is data risk, which data sets a model touches, whether personal, regulated, or confidential information is involved, and how that data moves and is stored. There is decision risk, which business actions the model influences, from cosmetic recommendations to credit decisions or security responses that might lock accounts or change configurations. There is model and intellectual property, IP, risk. How the model is trained, whether you are leaking proprietary patterns into a shared service or exposing yourself to copyright and licensing claims. And there is operational risk. Who maintains the model, how changes are deployed, and what happens when it fails at 2 in the morning. Most shadow projects land very differently on each of those axes. Once you are thinking in buckets instead of slogans, it becomes much easier to sort shadow projects into tolerate, tame, or terminate. Some experiments are relatively low risk and can be allowed to continue in a better environment with modest adjustments. Others are salvageable if you change their data sources, wrap them with monitoring, or move them onto a managed platform. A smaller subset will be non-negotiable shutdowns because they sit in the high-impact, high-uncertainty space. The leadership move is to be explicit about these distinctions and to communicate them in calm, specific language. That clarity is what lets you say to teams, we are not against experimentation, but here is where the line really is, and here is why. If your first visible move on shadow AI is a crackdown, you will drive it deeper underground. Stories of AI police audits travel quickly, and before long, teams quietly rename projects, strip AI out of slide titles, or move work off corporate systems entirely. You will feel briefly in control because fewer questionable initiatives cross your desk. In reality, you will have traded visibility for a kind of comfortable blindness. To do better, you need to recast the whole effort as a discovery program that assumes smart people have already built things worth understanding. A discovery program starts with intent that is both clear and credible. You tell the organization that you expect AI experimentation to exist, that you want to find it, and that the aim is to reduce risk and amplify value rather than to hand out punishments. Then you give people multiple safe ways to surface work: structured surveys that ask directly about models and automations, open office hours where teams can walk through what they are building, targeted outreach in domains where you know experimentation is common. You back that message with behavior. When a team comes forward, the first conversation is not an interrogation, but a diagnostic: what problem they are solving, what data they are using, what decisions the model touches, and how fragile the surrounding plumbing is. Behind those human conversations, you quietly use observability to fill in the picture. Cloud logs, data platform usage, and vendor admin panels often contain strong hints about where models and AI features are active. Instead of using those hints to spring traps, treat them as prompts. Reach out with, "We see that you are using this platform's AI scoring feature. Can we sit down and understand how that fits into your process?" Over time, you build a catalog of shadow AI projects and their risk profiles. That catalog is more than a control artifact. It is a strategic map showing where the business is trying to innovate faster than your official roadmap allows. Once you start surfacing shadow AI, the natural question from executives and risk partners is, what are our guardrails? The easy but dangerous response is to write a policy so broad and restrictive that it effectively bans anything not run through a central team. On paper, that looks safe. In practice, it recreates the same bottlenecks that pushed people into the shadows in the first place. A more sustainable approach is to design for guardrails without gridlock: clear, opinionated lanes where experimentation is easy and safe enough, and heavier governance reserved for the comparatively small set of AI uses that really warrant it. One practical pattern is to define tiers of AI usage with matching expectations. At the bottom, you might place low-risk experimentation on non-sensitive or synthetic data inside approved sandboxes. There, the bar is modest. Use sanctioned environments, tag your projects, and name an owner. In the middle tier, where real customer or operational data is involved, but decisions are reversible, requirements step up to design reviews, basic monitoring, and explicit sign-off from a data or risk owner. At the top tier, where models influence money movement, safety, legal exposure, or critical operations, you mandate full lifecycle governance, including formal validation, robust change control, and clear accountability at the executive level. The details will vary by organization, but the important thing is that people can see where their idea fits and what it takes to move. Guardrails remain theoretical unless you provide enabling infrastructure. Internal AI sandboxes and reference architectures give teams a starting point with better defaults for identity, logging, and data access. Model and feature catalogs turn ad hoc efforts into visible assets with owners, lineage, and minimal documentation. Lightweight review forums give business teams a predictable way to get eyes on a proposal without waiting for the next annual planning cycle. None of this eliminates shadow AI completely, and it does not need to. The real goal is to make the easiest way to build with AI also the safest way, so that over time, the path of least resistance and the path of least regret begin to converge. At some point, shadow AI stops being a quiet internal issue and becomes a topic for boards, auditors, or regulators. When that moment arrives, you do not want your story to be, "We just discovered a cluster of unsanctioned models last week." You want to say, with a straight face, that you understand how AI is used across the organization, that you have a program to surface and manage unofficial initiatives, and that you are deliberately steering experimentation into safer lanes. That narrative does not require perfection. It does require that you move beyond vague assurances and show how you are turning a messy reality into a managed one. With executives and boards, the emphasis should be on posture, patterns, and progress rather than on claims of absolute control.
You describe the landscape, where AI is officially deployed, where experimentation is concentrated, and which categories of use you consider high, medium, or low concern. You walk through your discovery program and guardrail tiers, using a few anonymized examples to illustrate how a shadow project moves from found in a corner to formally owned. You are candid about the gaps, areas where you suspect hidden activity still exists, and explicit about the steps you are taking to shrink those gaps over time. That mix of honesty and structure is far more credible than pretending you have perfect inventory in a fast-moving space.
Regulators and auditors will be interested in both control design and evidence that your story is real. Here, your catalog of projects, tier definitions, and review artifacts matter. You can show that when a rogue model is discovered, there is a repeatable path: risk assessment, decisions, remediation where needed, and documentation of outcomes. You frame shadow AI not as a failure of discipline, but as a known phenomenon you have integrated into your risk management. The organizations that come out of these conversations in the strongest position are not the ones that claim to have stamped out shadow AI. They are the ones that can show they saw it early and built a system to live with it on purpose.
At its core, this is about deciding whether shadow AI happens to you or with you. The models built in the corners of the business are not just anomalies to erase. They are signals about how your organization really solves problems under pressure. When you first hear about a little model that never crossed the official roadmap, you can treat it as a disciplinary issue or as an invitation to understand what your systems, processes, and incentives are actually rewarding. One path creates quieter shadows and more creative labeling. The other creates a more accurate map of reality.
Bringing shadow AI into the light does not mean blessing every experiment. It means seeing the landscape clearly enough to sort activity into what you tolerate, what you tame, and what you terminate, and being able to explain those calls in terms of data, decision, IP, and operational risk. It means replacing witch hunts with a discovery program that assumes smart people have already done interesting work, and pairing that with guardrails and infrastructure that make the right behaviors the easy ones. When you do that, your relationship with the business changes. You stop being the team that only appears to say no and become the team that helps convert scrappy experiments into sustainable capabilities. For you as a leader, the shift is as much cultural as it is technical. The organizations that navigate the next few years well will be the ones whose executives can talk about shadow AI without flinching, whose boards hear a coherent story about posture and progress, and whose engineers and analysts trust that raising their hand early will lead to a better outcome, not a punishment. A practical next move is simple. Ask your teams where they are already using AI or automation in ways that do not appear on any official slide. Then ask what that usage says about how your organization truly works, and what it would look like to manage that reality on purpose instead of by surprise.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.